What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Monday, July 8th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Only a 5-game MLB slate today, so a little bit more strategy talk, a little bit less talking about who the best pitchers are, who the best hitters are, because it's just not going to matter quite as much when you're talking about tournaments on a 5-game slate. Strategy comes into play more. Ownership matters a little bit more. Correlation matters a little bit more. Negative correlation, at least, matters a little bit more. So we'll dive into that stuff more than usual. Still should be a pretty fun slate to talk about. 5 to 7 gamers, I think, are still pretty enjoyable. As always, if you have questions in the chat, throw them in there. I will answer them as I see them, whether they're about the slate, whether they're about DFS in general, whatever it may be. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. All that stuff helps out a lot. Also, before we get into the slate, I mentioned on Twitter, kind of spitballing a new show idea. I've been thinking about maybe doing a show in the afternoon or evening, I guess, like 5 p.m. Eastern type spot, where instead of going game by game again, which I think is really boring, I don't have any interest in doing it. You probably don't have any interest in hearing it again from the same person. But taking a look at, we have some lineups at that point. Taking a look at what I would actually be playing myself if the slate started then, going through, looking at what my exposures would be, highlighting why I think I'm getting to some spots, why I'm not getting to some spots. Obviously it wouldn't be the same lineups that I'm going to end up playing because I'll end up rerunning everything once more lineups come out. But I think it would allow for a little bit more strategy talk, a little bit more nuanced. This is how I'm handling this ownership, as opposed to the show in the morning where it's like, yeah, I might do this, I might do that. I don't really know because lock isn't for 7 hours. So if there is interest in a more strategy-based show like that, closer to lock with some lineups out, let me know. I'll add that to the schedule. I'll start putting that out if there is interest. So let me know if there's interest in like a more tournament-specific type show closer to lock. Now we can go ahead and jump in. Guardians taking on the Tigers in the first game of the slate in Detroit. Actually forgot to double-check weather here, but no real weather concerns. So Tigers in Detroit, ballpark downgrade for the Guardians. Keep that in mind. Cleveland's been a very, very hitter-friendly park so far this season. Now they go into Detroit, not hitter-friendly. So it is a park downgrade for them. They do still have a relatively high implied run total here going up against Keter Montero. Montero is still 4K on DraftKings. I don't really know why that is. We have seen him make we've seen him make starts now. He's not like significantly limited or anything like that. He just shouldn't be $4,000. So he is clearly underpriced here. It's not a good matchup for him against Cleveland. This is a good offense. They're difficult to strike out. Montero projects for around a 20% strikeout percentage going forward. So it's not that you're looking at Montero as a great pitcher or anything, but if you did need to pay down, he is underpriced. He should just be probably like 6K. So pretty obviously underpriced. Projected for about 11% ownership. Showed up as optimal about 9% of the time for me. So everything makes sense to me on that front. Gavin Williams going to get some ownership here as well, and I think that he should. He's $8,500. He struggled in his last start against the White Sox. It cost me quite a bit of money. It was a shorter slate. He was like 25% owned. I think I played about 60, and he got lit up by one of the worst teams in baseball. But this is a highly regarded pitching prospect. Coming into the season, FanGraphs had him, or coming into last season rather, FanGraphs had him as a top 100 prospect. He spent some time in the majors last year, made 16 starts, 82 innings pitched, struck out 23.5% of hitters, 4.05 FIP. His last start against the White Sox was his first start of this year, returning from injury, but he should be a pretty good pitcher going forward. Projects for a 23 to 24% strikeout percentage, 4 to 4.2 FIP, depending on what projection sites you're looking at. Has a pretty good matchup here against the Tigers as well in a pitcher-friendly park. Tigers against right-handed pitching this year ranked 10th in strikeout percentage, 92 WRC plus on their active roster. Getting to Williams here looks pretty good. Again, it's a shorter slate as well, so you don't have as much opportunity cost at pitcher, which helps out. So I do like getting to him. He, going back to the start of last season, didn't give up a lot of power to either side of the plate. Lefties a 160 expected ISO, righties 113. Had a curveball he threw about 20% of the time to left-handed hitters. Had about a 13% swing strike percentage on that. Did only strike out 21% of lefties compared to about 24.5% of righties. But overall, he just looks like a pretty good pitcher, and this looks like a good spot to get to him against the Tigers. Offensively, neither of these stacks are showing up a ton, probably because of the park. Cleveland is showing up more than Detroit, which I would expect. They just have better hitters. They also have the better matchup against Montero. Jose Ramirez, as usual, looks popular. $6,500 third baseman. No issues with that. Josh Naylor has power at first base at 5,600. Actually looks like he's going a little bit under-owned to me, as is Steven Kwan. I mentioned this the other day with Steven Kwan, but the $5,800 price tag on him, there's a lot of sticker shock there, and it is a very healthy price tag. It's not one that I'm looking at and saying, no, he's underpriced. I think he looks great. But I do think it's important to keep in mind that he has made adjustments to his swing this season. Not only has he benefited from the jet stream blowing out to right field in Cleveland, but he has made adjustments to his swing. He is hitting the ball with more authority, driving the ball more, hitting for more power. So this is no longer a situation where in previous years, Steven Kwan was always really difficult to get to because he's a good overall hitter. And as a result, he would be priced, like upper 4Ks, but he wasn't giving you any power. So he was always tough to get to. Now he is more expensive than we're used to, but he is actually hitting for power. Now, this is not a park that is conducive to that. And that's why, Cleveland as a whole just isn't going to look as good as they would if this game were being played in Cleveland. But just a reminder that Steven Kwan has made swing adjustments. He is hitting for more power overall this year. Stephen Leibowitz said Duran and Kwan, your sticker shot guys. Yeah, Jaron Duran's another one. Duran obviously comes with stolen base upside, which is really nice. But Steven Kwan is hitting for more power this year. David Fry has a ton of power. Not a lot of ownership overall coming into this team. I do think they're going a little bit under-owned. Ramirez really looks like the only overly popular guy. On the other side, the Tigers, for the most part, are pretty cheap. So they do give you a value stack against a pretty popular pitcher in Williams. Riley Green's expensive at $4,900. That is warranted just based on his play this season. Other than that, though, Tigers pretty inexpensive throughout the lineup. So if you are looking to negatively correlate with Williams and need some value, the Tigers make sense. But just from a probability standpoint, chances of success standpoint, they don't look all that good because this park isn't good for power and the matchup with Williams isn't very good. On top of that, the Guardians do have a very good bullpen behind Williams. So even if they do have some success against Gavin Williams, there's a very good chance that that success comes to an end as soon as he leaves the game. Moving on to the Rockies and Cincinnati in Cincinnati. So Colorado getting outside of Coors, but still in one of the best hitters parks. Before I get to that, Chris King said, any NFL best ball shows? Yes. I don't have a specific date. I know Brick did one on this channel with Davis last week. I'll be doing some of those as well. There's also a chance that as the summer goes on and I start getting more into best ball, that I just start doing some on my own, maybe bringing some guests on myself. But right now, yes, is the short answer. Exactly when, I don't know. I do think I'll be doing some with Davis at the very least. So I will tweet those out. And yeah, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll find out about that. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll get notifications for those as well. But at some point in the near-term future, yes, there will be more NFL best ball shows on this channel. Jordan Klein watching. Glad you made it back from Ireland. Okay. Hope you had a good time over there with Josh. Moving on to Cincinnati. This is just a really good park for hitting, as usual. And obviously, there's no Coors on the slate because the Rockies are in Cincinnati. Andrew Abbott going for Cincinnati. Ryan Feltner for the Rockies. Neither of these pitchers are bad. Neither one is great. Andrew Abbott's strikeout numbers this year haven't been as good as expected. Only an 18.5% K percentage, 4.94 xFIP. Probably rebounds, at least somewhat, based on what we've seen from him in the past. But he has struggled a bit this year. Feltner striking out 19.3% of hitters, 4.01 xFIP. It is a park upgrade for him, technically. Like, the park still sucks, but it's not Coors Field, so that's nice at least. Pitches at least should move more the way that they should, if nothing else. Feltner, 5,500, underpriced here, getting 12% ownership. He showed up as optimal 20% of the time for me. Now, I do generally just have a little bit higher projection on Feltner than the field in general, but this is a really cheap price tag for a pitcher that really doesn't have terrible stuff. He's not a terrible pitcher. And while this is a tough park to pitch in, the Reds do have the third highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year at 26.2%, 92 WRC plus. Obviously, Ellie De La Cruz is fantastic, but overall, this lineup really isn't that good. So I don't mind using Feltner as a value play. He does have more strikeout upside here than Montero does at that cheaper price tag against Cleveland. Andrew Abbott getting 38% ownership, showed up as optimal 36% of the time for me. Very, very good matchup against the Rockies outside of Coors. Like I said, Abbott's not striking out a ton of guys this year, but the Rockies themselves will just give you strikeouts. I do think that there's merit just looking at this Abbott ownership to going to the Rockies in non-Abbott lineups, because he's a very mediocre pitcher to be getting in 1/3 of the field's lineups. This is very, very obviously a spot where Abbott is getting ownership because it's a short slate, so there's a lack of alternatives, and because of his opponent, much more than because of anything having to do with Andrew Abbott himself. So I do think that opens the door for getting the Colorado against him, but also he still looks like one of the best pitching plays. As you can see here, again, showing up 36% of the time for me, as far as optimal goes. So I do think the ownership is warranted. It does just open the door for contrarian, negatively correlated Rocky stacks in your non-Abbott lineups. Cincinnati and Colorado both showing up as middle of the pack stacks as far as probability goes. De La Cruz, I would expect to be getting to a lot here. Projected for 28% ownership, showed up 15% of the time for me. So I do think he's going a bit over-owned. Not really surprising, given that I think Ryan Feltner is going under-owned as well. But that's not to discourage anyone from getting to De La Cruz. There are plenty of lineup builds that he would make sense in. Just make sure that you're saving ownership somewhere else, whether that's going with a relatively low-owned pitcher, a low-owned stack. If you're getting to Rockies stacks, for example, using De La Cruz at shortstop would make a lot of sense because you're already contrarian. You're going against one of the most popular pitchers on the slate. At that point, you don't really need to worry too much about De La Cruz's ownership. You should just be looking to get to the best one-offs that you can with that contrarian stack. So that's an example of something that would make a lot of sense for De La Cruz. If you're going to like a 5-man Cincy stack, I'd be a little bit more cautious there, like especially if it's the more popular Cincy stack. De La Cruz, India, Candelario, Steele, Marte, or Stevenson. Like that particular stack is just going to have a lot of overlap. Even if it does well, you're going to have a hard time finishing at the top of large field tournaments. So in something like that, maybe you leave out De La Cruz. You go with India, Candelario, Steer, Marte, Stevenson, and you're already somewhat contrarian just because such a high percentage of Cincinnati stacks are going to have De La Cruz. So I do think there's a pretty good chance that I'll prefer him in as a one-off or in mini stacks as opposed to the full Reds 5-man, because I just think that he's going to be in such a high percentage of 5-man Red stacks. Jonathan India looks like a very good value at 4,100. Again, I don't think that Feltner's bad. I do think India's going a little bit over-owned, but still looks like one of your higher probability second base plays. Candelario, Steer, Marte, Stevenson, these guys all look fine. The Rockies not getting as much ownership as expected. Tovar getting 7%, showed up as optimal about 9% of the time for me. 14% ownership coming into a very, very inexpensive Brendan Rodgers. Not surprising. He looks like another of the better second base plays. Abbott so far this season, only allowing a 165 expected ISO to righties, 120 to lefties. So he has done a pretty good job limiting power. If you go back to last year, 173 expected ISO to righties. It's just strikeouts have been down so far this season. For Feltner this year, 193 expected ISO to lefties, only 118 to righties. Again, De La Cruz looks very, very good. It's just an ownership issue there. Candelario from the left side will look pretty good. But Feltner has done a good job limiting power against right-handed hitters. So I think this is a pretty interesting game because it's the best hitters park on the slate, and it's two pitchers that aren't great, but also aren't terrible. I think it's a spot where I'll have a lot of exposure to the game, whether it is pitching or hitting. I just like getting to all of it. There is a ton of upside here in general because the park is so good for hitting. The offenses aren't the best, but they're going to just play better in this park. But both offenses also give you a lot of strikeouts. So in spots, in lineups where you're not playing the Reds, you're not playing the Rockies, it makes a ton of sense to just be getting to the opposing pitcher because there's probably going to be a lot of strikeouts here. There's a good chance there's a lot of home runs here. I just want pretty much all parts of this game. The Twins are taking on the White Sox in Chicago. Twins look like a very good offensive team today going up against Chris Flexen. Chris Paddock is going for Minnesota. Paddock has missed some time trying to pull up quickly to see what he did in his most recent rehab starts, but he does obviously have a very good matchup here against the White Sox. He has been solid overall this season. $7,500, so a pretty good price tag. Projected for around 11% ownership. He went on the injured list went on the injured list on June 25th. Forearm fatigue, so that is obviously concerning as far as what we're expecting when he comes back. He didn't miss a ton of time, which is good. So I would assume that he is on some sort of pitch limit here, as in probably not throwing 100 pitches or anything, but he wasn't out that long, so I do doubt that it's anything drastic like 50 pitches or 3 innings or anything like that. So unless we get news throughout the day that he is significantly limited, I assume he is playable on a 5-game slate against the White Sox. Showed up as 12% optimal for me, fields at 11%. That's how I view him with the information that I have right now. If he were not returning from injury and wasn't dealing with forearm fatigue, he'd probably be getting more ownership. He would be projected higher. As is, I think that risk is pretty much baked in to his projection here. You can see it only at about 11.5. So all of this looks fine to me given the matchup. Flexing at 6,500. I think he's going under-owned just from an optimal versus ownership standpoint. He's still a pretty low probability play. He's not somebody I really want that much of. He's not a very good pitcher. The biggest case for him would be that I am assuming Minnesota is going to get a lot of ownership in this spot. If Flexen pitches well, then Minnesota's not doing well, so you get that negative correlation. But he is a pretty bad pitcher. 5.05 xFIP this year, 17.2% K percentage. Like the best argument I guess I can make for Flexen outside of just the one I just did about negative correlation with Minnesota. If you just look at his numbers this year and then you just look at Andrew Abbott's numbers, Abbott, 18.5% K percentage, Flexen, 17.2, 4.9 xFIP for Abbott, a little over 5 for Flexen. Obviously, Abbott's numbers project to get better going forward. Flexen's really don't. I'm not trying to say Flexen is the same pitcher as Abbott, but my point is that he's getting like 1/7 the ownership of Abbott. So this is a spot where if this slate had 9, 10, 11 games, I would have not said a word about Chris Flexen. Given that it's 5 games in your largest field tournaments, I can see maybe getting some Flexen. I typically prefer to be contrarian with my bats compared to my pitchers, though. So probably still won't really be getting there. Minnesota showing up as the most or highest used stack for me right now. No, you can't pure whips. Minnesota showing up as the highest owned stack right now. It's a good spot against Flexen. They obviously look really good. There's not a whole lot to say there. Flexen is probably the worst pitcher on the slate. Minnesota's not a bad offense. They, against right-handed pitching so far this season, 19.4% strikeout percentage, 112 WRC plus. You do get some pinch hit risk here in general just because they do platoon, but that's not as much of an issue going up against a right-handed pitcher in Flexen as it is when they face a lefty. The White Sox do have 2 left-handed relievers in their bullpen. Schuster threw 40 pitches on Thursday, so not sure if he'll be available today. There is some pinch hit risk for guys like Larnach, depending on how the lineup sets up. I'd be a little bit more cautious if you get something like Larnach, Kepler, and another lefty back-to-back-to-back. But overall, looks like a pretty good spot for Minnesota. Carlos Correa did leave yesterday's game early, so we will have to pay attention to that. Hopefully he's in the lineup. He would look like a very good shortstop play if he is. 223 expected ISO allowed to righties since the start of last season for Flexen. Only 168 this year, so that has improved. Lefties have gotten to him, though, with a 224 expected ISO. Castro, Kepler, Larnach, Santana, all from the left side. And then you have right-handed power, too, with Correa, Buxton, Jeffers, Miranda, who's been hitting really, really well. So happy to get to Minnesota. On the other side for the White Sox, if they're going to be low-owned, I have some interest just because there is a huge question mark around Paddock. Like, we have no idea what his stuff's going to look like here. He's not a lights-out pitcher anyway, and it's a 5-game slate. So if the ownership on the White Sox is low, I think they make some sense as a value stack. 4,300 for Pham, 4K for Jimenez. Ownership pretty much where it should be, I think. So they just kind of look like a middle-of-the-field stack for me. Before we move into the Texas and Angels game, to more fully acknowledge what Pure Whip said in chat, can we get videos using a regular opto and not sims all the time? No, because I don't use a regular opto, and it wouldn't actually give you the information that would give you is a lot less useful than what a sim is giving you, because a opto is just using median projections and then telling you what the highest projected lineups are. A sim is factoring in range of outcomes more. So when you're looking at chances of a player being optimal, their chances of success versus ownership, an optimizer is actually not really telling you much of anything. Sim does tell you more. If you use an optimizer in your process, that's fine. Subscribe to the Endgame channel. Link is in the description below. Uticow has put out several videos on how he uses optimizers in his process. So if you are an optimizer user, not a Sims user, you sign up to Endgame, you will get better. You'll get information on how you can use that optimizer better. It's not going to be on this show because using an optimizer on this show would kind of just give you really useless information. But yeah, if you haven't already signed up, and this is to anybody, for Endgame, link in the description below. We put that site together with the idea of helping you get better on your own, helping you be more self-sustaining, self-efficient, at DFS. It's Brick75, Utical, myself, and Nerdy Tenor. We all play differently. So like I was just saying, if you're an optimizer guy, Uta is right up your alley. Sims, me, Brick, Nerdy, all use those to varying degrees. We all have different approaches to how we play. So there's going to be somebody probably that plays similarly to you that can give you advice, help make you better. We have videos up on the site already. We have more coming out pretty much all the time. So sign up, check that out. Now moving on to the Rangers and the Angels, another good hitters park in Angel Stadium. Jon Gray and Davis Daniel. Daniel obviously had that really, really good start against, I think it was the Tigers a couple of starts ago. That's not who he is going forward. But at 8K here, he does still look decent on a 5-game slate, showing up as optimal around 14% of the time, projected for 12% ownership. This is just another pitcher where he's a secondary play on this slate because of the lack of alternatives available. But in general, like if this were a bigger slate, you're just not going to be interested. The matchup against Texas is not ideal. They have struggled this year overall, but we do know that they have talent in their lineup. Overall this season, only a 90 WRC plus. They do have only an 18.8% strikeout percentage as well, though. That's 5th lowest against right-handed pitching. And again, just very, very high likelihood that by the end of the season, their WRC plus, their production against righties is just going to be higher than it is. So certainly don't view it as a good matchup for Daniel. He is just a breathing pitcher on a 5-game slate that doesn't have much good pitching. Jon Gray on the other side does look quite a bit better here. 23.5% projected ownership, 23.5% chance of being optimal using my projections. The Angels are not as good offensively against right-handed pitching. 7th highest strikeout percentage on their active roster so far this season. Only an 88 WRC plus. Looks like a very, very good spot for Jon Gray. 20.6% K percentage isn't great, but again, we just don't have strikeout pitchers on this slate outside of Chris Sale in the next game. 4.07 xFIP for Gray. It just looks like a pretty good spot despite the park. And keep in mind, he does also pitch in a hitter-friendly park for his home games. So it's not like we're talking about a pitcher here that's going from pitching in like Seattle, where it's really, really difficult to score runs, to pitching in Anaheim. He is pretty accustomed to pitching in favorable hitting conditions. So he looks like a good play, especially at 7K. Looks like a good value. Has some of the highest strikeout upside on the slate as well. Happy to get to Ranger stacks here going up against Daniel. As I mentioned, he just projects as a pretty mediocre pitcher going forward, despite his overall numbers in a limited sample in the majors so far. So Texas looks good. Pitch count concerns for who? Einsteinium. Not sure. You might be behind. And you're I guess talking about Gray. 77 pitches last time out, 73 before that, 72 before that. To some extent, I don't want to read into those too much. The 73 pitches against Baltimore, he was just getting lit up. He gave up 8 runs in 5 innings. Not sure why. Oh, so he went in. He made it into the 5th inning last start and then was taken out. So I'm not overly concerned about the pitch count there because, again, he was just kind of taken out for performance in that one. Went 4 innings, started the 5th, got in trouble in the 5th. They took him out at 77 pitches. I don't think it was a he's only throwing 80 pitches type thing. If he pitches well, he should be able to throw more pitches than that. If he doesn't pitch well, then obviously it's not that much of a concern anyway because he wasn't getting you fantasy points. The Rangers against Daniel look like a very good team to get to. They should be pretty popular, but like Corey Seager, for example, is I think a big reason why Ellie De La Cruz looks so overowned for me. It's not that Seager is better than De La Cruz, but pretty similar range of outcomes. When you factor in the salary, Seager actually is showing up optimal more often for me than De La Cruz. But Seager right now projected for half the ownership. Maybe that changes by lock and those two numbers come closer together. There's a pretty good chance that it will. But Seager's clearly a really, really high upside shortstop option in a good spot. Good hitters park, good matchup, way less expensive than De La Cruz and lower owned, at least right now. So that looks good. Very favorable price tag on Nathaniel Lowe at 3,700. Semien and Garcia are relatively cheap. Josh Smith gives you MPE. Wyatt Langford's finally been hitting a bit better and gives you stolen base upside as well. This Texas team is affordable. They're in a good park. They're not getting as much ownership as a team like the Reds, top to bottom. I really like them here. Angels on the other side. If you're going there, I think it's because of the 24% ownership coming into Gray. He is one of the better pitchers on the slate, but he's still not great. The Angels are not a good offense, but they are in a good park. So it is just a spot where if you play the Angels, you can fit good pitching and good secondary stacks or one-offs around them because they're cheap. The park helps. And then if they just happen to have a good game against Gray, you are knocking off 24% of the field. So there is value in that. They're not a particularly high likelihood team to succeed, high probability team, but they do give you that negative correlation, which is nice. So worth considering in your larger field tournaments. And then finally, we get to the very, very, very clear top pitcher on the slate, Chris Sale taking on the Diamondbacks in Arizona. Projected for 60% ownership, showed up as optimal 39% of the time for me. So I think he's going a little bit over-owned, but he's in the optimal lineup 39% of the time. And as a reminder, you're not trying to build optimal lineups in baseball. It's a fool's errand. So when I see a pitcher like this, I assume I'm just going to have a ton because I don't care all that much that he's quote unquote going over owned. Within like reasonable lineups that I would build and expect to play, that optimal percentage would come up. So he's extremely likely to succeed. I would rather be, when it comes to being contrarian, I would rather be attacking hitter spots like I mentioned before. I'd rather be attacking those spots like De La Cruz getting 30% ownership as a hitter. And I hate using that example because I do think he's one of the best plays on the slate. But examples like that, where there's just so much more volatility in hitting, you're getting 4 or 5 at bats. You can hit 5 balls 105 miles an hour. And if they're right at people, you get 0 fantasy points. Whereas pitching, it's a little bit more projectable. Sale is just throwing pitch after pitch after pitch. And we know how good he is. There's also just such a big margin in talent between Sale and anybody else pitching today. 32.7% K percentage on the year, 2.45 xFIP, 27.8% K minus BB percentage. To put that in context on this slate, the next highest K minus BB percentage is Davis Daniel at 20%. And that's an inflated number because of his start against the Tigers. His real K minus BB will be even lower. If you look at the guys that have any sort of sample, like John Gray's at 14.2%, Paddock's at 15.1%, Feltner's at 13.1%. Sale is just unbelievably better than any other pitcher on this slate. Very, very clear priority. It's not the best matchup against Arizona. They are a difficult team to strike out, but Chris Sale is a much better than average strikeout pitcher, obviously. Looks fantastic. Stephen Leibowitz said the park downplays power as well. Yeah, you have Cincinnati on this slate. You have Angel Stadium on this slate. White Sox Stadium is fine as well. So the fact that he is in a pitcher-friendly park stands out a little bit more than on slates where you would have a lot of pitcher-friendly parks. Also, very, very, very obvious number one pitching option. On the other side, Yolber Diaz is going for Arizona. Not an ideal matchup going against the Braves, although they have struggled a bit recently. So far this season, 4 starts at AAA, 11 starts at AA for Diaz, 54 innings at AA, 22 at AAA, 34.2% K percentage at AA, 30.8% at AAA. Projects for like a 22 to 23% strikeout percentage going forward, around a 4.3 FIP. He looks like a solid pitcher, and he does warrant some consideration on this slate. He is only 23 years old, making his major league debut. There's obviously a lot of volatility here. The Braves have good hitters in their lineup, even without Acuna, but it is a pretty good pitcher's park. He is cheap at 6K, projected for 11% ownership, showed up optimal about 16% of the time for me. He's just another pitcher that I think is in this bucket of like 10 to 20% owned guys, 10 to 20% optimal guys, whether that's Feltner, Feltner, Paddock, Gray is like at the top end of that. Williams, probably at the top end of that. Just a lot of pitchers that look pretty similar here. Davis Daniel in there as well. And Diaz is one of them. Atlanta as a stack looks pretty good, showing up third most for me behind Minnesota and Texas, which is what I would expect. Even though the park's not great, you do have a guy making his major league debut. There is no way to quantify how nerves are going to affect somebody. There's the chance that, obviously none of these hitters have seen him before. So maybe they struggle a little bit out of the gate. But also maybe he just can't throw strikes. He's behind the counts. Certainly wouldn't be the first time to see what ends up being a solid pitcher get lit up in his debut. So no way to quantify how nerves affect anything and all of that. I think just even viewing this, though, as this is a pitcher that projects to be pretty good going forward, but is facing a lineup that has a lot of talent on a slate where also you have the Tigers offense, the Rockies offense, and the White Sox offense. So there's not a lot of good offenses on this slate. Angels offense as well. The Braves are just going to look good. 10 to 15% ownership coming into Olsen, Riley, Albies, Kelnick, Murphy, Duvall, Ozuna. All of that is warranted. Pretty similar optimal percentages as well. Braves just look like a good stack here. Arizona on the other side, if you're talking negative correlation, obviously you can't really do it any better than Arizona against Sale. That being said, I hope I'm not getting to them on this slate. This is the kind of spot where, in that show I was mentioning at the beginning, I would have a better idea of, shit, maybe I am playing Arizona, and we can talk about why. There's no doubt that they negatively correlate with a high percentage of the field. My assumption right now, without having built any lineups, is that I'm probably just jamming Chris Sale as the far and away best pitcher and not getting to Arizona. But if you wanted to play Arizona, the very obvious reasoning is simply that if they do well, 70% of the field or 60% of the field just lost a pitcher. I doubt that is the approach that I end up taking on this one. I think there's going to be enough other spots for me to target. So to recap the top pitching on this slate, Chris Sale in a complete league of his own, far, 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 far away the best pitcher. Andrew Abbott coming in second for me at 8,200. John Gray would be the third guy. But there's kind of just like a whole pool here of Gray, Feltner, Williams, Diaz that I think look pretty good, especially when you factor in the salaries for Feltner and Diaz. Then there's a little bit of a drop off to like Daniel and Paddock. Montero as a pure punt value is fine just because he's 4K. The matchup does suck though. Chris Flexen, I think, is the most difficult pitcher to make a case for, other than he's the only pitcher projected for single-digit ownership today, which is kind of a case on it by itself. So overall, just a slate with Chris Sale and then a lot of really shitty pitching. Offensively, that creates a slate that is pretty much wide open because outside of Arizona, every team's in a pretty good matchup here. Minnesota, Texas, Atlanta look like the top stacks. You can get some negative correlation in the middle here by going with like Colorado against a very, very popular Abbott. When you look at the ownership for pitching, the two guys getting the most were Sale and Abbott. Sale, obviously, much, much more talented than Abbott. So I do think the Rockies in that park are my favorite negative correlation stack. So that's all I have for you today. I will probably go ahead and come back at 5, do that tournament show that I was talking about. Subscribe to the channel. You'll get a notification when I post it. I will tweet out if I'm definitely doing that, but most likely going to be back today at 5 for a first crack at that tournament show. I think it's a pretty interesting slate to start that off on just because of how wide open it is. So plan on me back here at 5 to check that out. Thanks for watching the show. Good luck on the rest of your lineups. I'll see you later on.